The hand that wasn't supposed to move moved. Amara Cole stood frozen in the doorway, her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. The mansion hallway stretched behind her, cold and silent, but all she could hear was the thundering of her own heartbeat. In the dim light of the bedroom, Kong Min-jae sat in his wheelchair, exactly where she'd left him 30 minutes ago. Except now his head had turned. Just slightly. Just enough. His eyes, those dark eyes she'd stared into 1,000 times while searching for any sign of life, were looking directly at her. Then he spoke. Amara. His voice was rough, like gravel scraped across concrete, and used and broken. Let's go inside. Her keys fell from her hand, hitting the marble floor with a sharp clatter that echoed through the empty mansion. 3 years. 3 years of caring for a man the doctors swore was gone. 3 years of one-sided conversations, of confessions whispered to someone she believed would never hear them. 3 years of pouring her heart out to a living ghost. And he'd heard every single word. Welcome to Afro-Korean Chronicle TV, where we bring you the most compelling stories of love, culture, and the unexpected connections that change everything. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you won't want to miss what happens next in this impossible story. Trust me, what you're about to hear will shatter everything you think you know about love and redemption. But we need to go back. Back to where this impossible thing began. Back to when Amara Cole was just another invisible woman trying to survive in a world that had already decided she didn't matter. 3 years earlier, Amara sat in her car in the parking lot of Henderson's department store, eating cold French fries and trying not to cry. The promotion had gone to Jessica. Of course it had gone to Jessica. Jessica with her perfect figure and her perfect smile and her perfect everything. Never mind that Amara had been there 2 years longer. Never mind that she knew the inventory system better than anyone. Never mind that she'd trained Jessica herself. You're just not the face we want representing management, her boss had said, not quite meeting her eyes. The words he didn't say hung in the air between them, heavy and cruel. You're too fat. You're too black. You're too much of everything we don't want people to see. Amara shoved another cold fry into her mouth and scrolled through her phone. 3 jobs, and she still couldn't make rent. The math didn't work anymore. Nothing worked anymore. She was 28 years old, and so tired, she could barely remember what it felt like to not be exhausted. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but desperation made people do strange things. Miss Cole. The voice was crisp, professional, female. My name is Director Han. I'm calling about a private caregiving position. Your agency gave me your number as their most reliable candidate. Amara sat up straighter.
I'm listening.
The position is full-time live-in. The patient is a 42-year-old male, completely incapacitated due to traumatic brain injury. He requires 24-hour care, but is medically stable. No feeding tubes, no complex medical equipment. Just presence. What's the pay? Amara asked, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. $15,000 a month. Plus room and board. All meals provided. No days off, but you'll have your own private suite and complete freedom when the patient is sleeping. Amara's breath stopped. $15,000. That was more than all 3 of her jobs combined. That was enough to pay off her mother's medical bills. That was enough to finally breathe. What's the catch? She asked, because there was always a catch. A pause. Then, the patient is unresponsive, Miss Cole. Completely unresponsive. He doesn't speak, doesn't move, doesn't react. The neurologist says there's minimal brain activity. You would essentially be caring for someone who isn't there. Many caregivers find this psychologically difficult. The isolation can be challenging. The previous 3 nurses all quit within 2 months. I'll take it, Amara said immediately. Don't you want to know more about? I'll take it. Another pause. Very well. Can you start Monday? That was how Amara Cole found herself standing in the marble foyer of a mansion that looked like it belonged in a Korean drama, not in the suburbs of Chicago. Director Han was exactly what her voice suggested, A thin Korean woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled back, so tight it looked painful, and eyes that seemed to catalog every flaw in Amara's appearance in under 3 seconds. "The patient is upstairs," Director Han said, leading Amara through hallways lined with art that probably cost more than Amara's entire life. "Mr. Kang's condition is stable but permanent. The previous injury occurred 3 years ago. We've maintained hope for recovery, but..." She trailed off, her expression carefully neutral. They stopped outside a closed door. Director Han's hand rested on the handle, but she didn't open it yet. "Miss Cole, I need you to understand something. Mr. Kang is a very important man. The security here is extensive. You'll be required to sign multiple NDAs. You cannot discuss your employment with anyone. You cannot take photographs. You cannot have visitors. If you violate these terms, the consequences will be severe. Do you understand?" Amara nodded. She didn't care what secrets this place held. She needed the money. Director Han opened the door. The room was beautiful in a cold, untouched way. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a garden that looked like something from a painting. The furniture was minimal, expensive, chosen by someone who valued form over comfort. And in the center of it all, positioned by the window where morning light could fall across his face, was Kang Min-jae. Amara's first thought was that he looked like a king, even motionless, even trapped in that wheelchair with a blanket across his lap. There was something commanding about him. He was Korean, probably in his early 40s, with sharp features that suggested he'd been devastating before whatever happened to him happened. His hair was perfectly cut, his clothes expensive. His hands, resting on the arms of the wheelchair, were scarred across the knuckles like he'd spent years punching things that punched back. But his eyes were open, staring straight ahead at nothing, and they were completely empty. "Mr. Kang," Director Han said, though her tone suggested she didn't expect any response, "this is Amara Cole. She'll be your new caregiver." Nothing. Not a flicker. Not a breath of acknowledgement. "He can't hear you," Director Han continued, speaking to Amara now. The neurologist confirmed it. The brain damage affected the auditory processing centers. "He's essentially deaf, blind to sound. You can speak freely around him. He won't know." Amara stepped closer, studying the man in the wheelchair. Something about the stillness felt wrong, too perfect, too controlled. But when she looked into those eyes, there was nothing looking back. "What happened to him?" she asked. Director Han's expression flickered, something dark passing behind her eyes. "An accident. That's all you need to know. Your job is to maintain his physical care. Bathing, dressing, repositioning to prevent bed sores, feeding, medication administration. The schedule is posted in the care binder. A doctor visits weekly. If there are any changes in his condition, any at all, you call me immediately." She handed Amara a phone. "This is for emergencies only. It only calls one number."
Mine.
"Does he have family?" Amara asked, still staring at Min-jae. "Does anyone visit?" "No," the word was sharp, final. "Mr. Kang's family is deceased. There are no visitors. Ever." Director Han left 30 minutes later, after showing Amara the medication schedule, the supply closet, the kitchen stocked with enough food to survive an apocalypse. She left Amara alone in that massive mansion with a man who couldn't hear, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but exist in whatever dark space his mind had retreated to. The first week was the loneliest week of Amara's life. She'd thought she understood isolation. She'd spent years being overlooked, ignored, invisible. But this was different. This was silence so complete it felt like drowning. The mansion was too big, too quiet. Her footsteps echoed. Her breathing echoed. Every sound she made just reminded her that she was alone. Caring for Min-jae was easy, physically. He never resisted, never reacted. She could position him however she needed, and he'd stay there, pliant and empty. She bathed him in the specialized bathroom with the roll-in shower. She dressed him in expensive clothes that felt obscene to put on someone who'd never know he was wearing them. She fed him carefully, tilting his head back so the pureed food would slide down his throat, triggering the swallow reflex that was one of the few automatic functions his body still performed. And through it all, he stared at nothing. By the second week, Amara started talking to him. She didn't plan it. It just happened. The silence was crushing her, and even if he couldn't hear, she needed to hear a human voice, even if it was just her own. "So, I used to work at a department store," she said while changing his shirt. "Henderson's. Real classy place. You know, the kind where the customers treat you like you're not even human? Yeah, that kind." She buttoned his shirt carefully, her fingers working automatically. "I worked there for 5 years. 5 years of smiling while people talked past me like I was furniture. 5 years of watching thinner, prettier girls get promoted while I stayed stuck at the register." Min Jae stared at the wall. His chest rose and fell with mechanical precision. "The worst part wasn't even the customers," Amara continued, moving to brush his hair. "It was thick, dark, surprisingly soft. It was my coworkers. They'd talk about their dates, their boyfriends, their problems, and I'd stand there nodding like I related. But nobody ever asked about my life. Nobody ever wondered if I was okay." She paused, looking at his reflection in the mirror. "Kinda like now, I guess. Except you're not pretending to care. You actually can't hear me. Somehow that's more honest." The days blended together. Morning routine, afternoon routine, evening routine. Feed, bathe, dress, reposition. Check vitals, administer medications, document everything. The doctor came every Thursday, an old Korean man who spoke broken English, and examined Min Jae with the detached efficiency of someone performing an autopsy on a body that hadn't realized it was dead yet. "No change," he'd say every week, shaking his head. "No change." But Amara kept talking. It became easier, more natural. Min Jae became her diary, her therapist, her confessor. He was the safest person she'd ever known, because he'd never judge her, never leave her, never hurt her with the truth of what he thought about her. "You want to know something pathetic?" Amara asked one night during the third week, sitting on the edge of Min Jae's bed while thunder rumbled outside. She'd moved him from the wheelchair an hour ago, positioned him carefully on his side with pillows supporting his back. "I'm 28 years old, and I've never had a real boyfriend. Not one. I've had guys who wanted to sleep with me, sure. Guys who'd text me at 2 in the morning, come over, do what they needed to do, and leave before sunrise. But a boyfriend? Someone who'd actually be seen with me in public? Never." She pulled the blanket up higher on his shoulders, her hand lingering there for a moment. His skin was warm under the expensive cotton of his pajamas. "There was this one guy, Marcus. We worked together at my second job, the coffee shop. He was sweet, you know? Made me laugh. We'd text all the time, stay late talking after our shifts. I thought maybe," she laughed, but it came out bitter. "Then one night I saw him at a bar with his friends. I waved, walked over, and you should have seen his face. Like I'd caught him doing something shameful. He barely acknowledged me. The next day he told me we should keep things professional. I didn't even know we had things to keep professional." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating Min Jae's face. For just a second, Amara thought she saw something in his eyes, but it was gone so fast she decided it was just the storm playing tricks. "My mom used to say I'd be so pretty if I just lost weight," Amara continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "She meant well, I think. She was just worried nobody would want me. Turns out she was right." She stood up, walking to the window. Rain lashed against the glass. "The funny thing is, I don't even hate my body. I mean, I did for years. But somewhere along the way, I just got tired of hating myself. This is who I am. I'm fat. I'm black. I'm loud when I laugh, and I take up space, and apparently that's too much for the world to handle." She turned back to look at him, this strange, beautiful, broken man who'd become her only companion. "But you don't care about any of that, do you? You can't even see me. Maybe that's why I feel safe here." What Amara didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that calm Min Jae heard every single word, every confession, every broken piece of her heart that she laid bare in that room. He'd been awake for 2 years and 7 months. The accident that supposedly destroyed his mind had been no accident at all. It had been an execution attempt, a message from the Chinese syndicate that had been slowly encroaching on his territory in Chicago's Koreatown. They'd sent 4 men to his home, the home he'd shared with his wife Ji-yeon and his daughter Hannah. They'd come in the middle of the night with guns and gasoline and a list of grievances that went back 5 years. Min-jae had killed 3 of them, but not before they killed everything that mattered. Ji-yeon died protecting Hannah. Hannah died because Min-jae hadn't been fast enough, hadn't been careful enough, hadn't seen the threat until it was standing in his daughter's bedroom with a gun. She was 6 years old. She'd been wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with the cartoon rabbits. The 4th man had beaten Min-jae nearly to death and left him in the burning house. Director Han, his second-in-command and the closest thing he had to family, had pulled him out. The doctors said it was a miracle he survived. They said the brain damage was extensive, irreversible. They said he'd never wake up. Director Han had seen an opportunity in that tragedy. She'd helped him fake the extent of his injuries, helped him disappear into his own paralysis, while she rebuilt his information network from the shadows. The plan was simple. Let his enemies think he was gone, let them feel safe enough to expose themselves, and then burn them all to ash. He'd spent the first 6 months in genuine medical care, healing, planning, hating himself for every breath he took while his wife and daughter were cold in the ground. Then Director Han had moved him to the mansion, hired caregivers who believed the lie, and he'd settled into his prison of stillness and rage. The first 2 caregivers had been professionals, efficient and cold. They treated him like an object, which was what he'd expected, what he'd wanted. The 3rd had been kind but pitying, talking to him like he was a child who needed simple words and gentle tones. She'd lasted the longest, but eventually the isolation had broken her too. Then came Amara. The first time he saw her, following Director Han into his room with uncertainty written all over her face, Min-jae had felt nothing. She was large, dark-skinned, clearly nervous. Another caregiver who'd quit within weeks. He'd already started the mental countdown. But then she touched him, adjusting the blanket across his lap, and her hands had been so gentle, so careful, like he was something precious instead of something broken. And when she'd looked into his eyes, searching for recognition that couldn't be there, he'd seen something in her face that he recognized. Loneliness. The kind that had roots, that went deep, that had been there so long it had become part of her foundation. He knew that loneliness. He wore it like a second skin. The first time she talked to him, really talked to him, Min-jae had been startled. Most caregivers maintained professional silence or spoke only in medical terminology. But Amara talked to him like he was a person, like the conversation was real, even though she believed it was one-sided. And as the weeks passed, as she poured out her hurt and her history into the silence of his room, something Min-jae thought was dead started to feel again. Her pain made him angry. The way the world had treated her, dismissed her, used her, made him want to hurt people. When she cried about Marcus, about being someone's shameful secret, Min-jae had fantasized about finding the man and breaking every bone in his hands. When she talked about her mother's cutting comments disguised as concern, he'd wanted to scream that she was beautiful exactly as she was, that anyone who couldn't see that was blind and stupid and didn't deserve to breathe her air. But he couldn't. He could only lie there, or sit there, locked in his self-made prison while this woman who thought she was invisible slowly became the only thing he could see. By the 2nd month, Min-jae had memorized everything about her. The way she hummed old R&B songs while she worked. The way she always repositioned him so he could see the garden, even though she thought he couldn't see anything. The way her voice changed when she talked about her mother, getting softer, more careful, like the love and hurt were tangled too tight to separate. The way she laughed, sudden and loud and utterly unself-conscious, when something on her phone amused her. The way she'd started touching him more, her hand resting on his shoulder while she talked, her fingers gentle in his hair, like she'd forgotten he wasn't supposed to feel it. He'd started looking forward to her voice. Started dreading the nights when she'd leave him alone in the dark with nothing but his guilt and his ghosts. Started wishing, in moments he hated himself for, that he could speak to her, tell her she wasn't invisible, tell her she mattered. But he couldn't. The plan was too important. The syndicate was finally making moves, getting sloppy with confidence. Director Han reported back every week with new intelligence, new connections, new proof of the corruption that went all the way to the Chinese consulate. They were close, so close to having everything they needed to destroy the entire operation. He just had to stay dead a little longer. Then one night, 3 months into Amara's employment, she said something that cracked the ice around his heart so hard, he almost gasped. "I think I'm starting to care about you," she whispered, sitting beside his bed during another thunderstorm. "Isn't that stupid? You're not even here. You're just a body I take care of, a job I do, but somehow you've become the most important person in my life." She laughed, sad and small. "I talk to you more than I've talked to anyone in years. I tell you things I've never told anyone. And I know you can't hear me, I know you're not in there, but it feels like you are. It feels like someone's finally listening." Her hand found his, lying still on top of the blanket. She laced her fingers through his, and Min-jae had to use every ounce of control he developed over months of practice to keep from squeezing back. "I'm scared," she continued, "that when this job ends, and it will end eventually, I'll go back to being completely alone. Because even though you can't respond, even though this is all one-sided, I don't feel alone anymore. Does that make sense? You're the best relationship I've ever had, and you're not even conscious." A tear fell on their joined hands. Hers, not his, though he felt his own burning behind his eyes. "I hope wherever you are," Amara whispered, "you're at peace. I hope you're not trapped somewhere dark and scared. I hope you're free." That was the moment Min-jae realized he was in serious trouble. Because he didn't want to be free. He wanted to stay right here, listening to this woman's voice, feeling her warmth, existing in these stolen moments where he got to pretend he was still human enough to deserve gentleness. But the universe, as always, had other plans. It started small, the kind of thing only someone who'd been watching him every day would notice. Amara was repositioning him one morning, shifting him from the bed to the wheelchair, when she paused. "Your muscle tone is different," she said, more to herself than to him. Her hands pressed gently against his arm, testing. "You're not as atrophied as you should be." She frowned, that little crease appearing between her eyebrows that he'd learned meant she was thinking hard. "The doctor said you'd lose more muscle mass, but you haven't. If anything, you feel stronger." She looked at his face, searching. "Are you doing something? Some kind of automatic physical therapy I don't know about?" Min-jae kept his expression blank, empty, dead. But inside, alarm bells were ringing. He'd been careful, so careful, to only exercise when she was asleep, to maintain the appearance of atrophy. But apparently not careful enough. Amara shook her head, dismissing her own thoughts. "I'm being ridiculous. You can't do anything on your own." But doubt had been planted, small and insidious. 2 days later, she noticed his hand. She'd been singing while folding his laundry, some old Aretha Franklin song her mother used to play, and she was hitting the high notes with enthusiastic imprecision when she glanced over at him. His right hand, resting on the arm of the wheelchair, had curled slightly. Just the fingers, just barely, but it had moved. Amara stopped singing, walked over slowly, stared at his hand. "Mr. Kong." Her voice was uncertain, hopeful in a way that made Min-jae's chest tight. "Can you hear me?" He didn't move, didn't breathe any differently, gave her nothing. She waited for a full minute, watching his hand with an intensity that made his skin prickle with awareness. Then she slowly reached out and touched his fingers, uncurling them gently. "I'm seeing things," she muttered. "The isolation is getting to me." But she pulled out her phone and took a picture of his hand position anyway, and Min-jae knew she'd be comparing it later, checking, watching. He'd gotten sloppy, complacent, comfortable. And comfort was always when mistakes happened. That night, while Amara was in her room, Min-jae allowed himself to move for the first time in her presence. He knew she was asleep, had heard her routine enough times to recognize the pattern. Shower, phone call to her mother that always left her voice tight and sad, then silence. He waited an extra hour to be safe, then slowly, carefully, stood from the wheelchair. His legs were weak from months of limited use, but he'd been maintaining them enough to keep functionality. He walked to the window, looking out at the garden bathed in moonlight. This was his nightly ritual, these stolen moments of movement, of remembering he had a body that still worked. He was at the window when he heard it. The smallest sound. A floorboard creaking in the hallway. Min-jae moved faster than he had in months, returning to the wheelchair, positioning himself exactly as he'd been. His heart hammered against his ribs. If she'd seen, if she knew, everything was compromised. Director Han would have to accelerate the timeline. The syndicate would know. The whole plan would collapse. But Amara didn't come in. The sound faded. Maybe she'd gotten up for water, stopped at his door to check on him, but decided not to enter. Maybe he was paranoid, and it had been nothing at all. He sat in the wheelchair for the rest of the night, not daring to move, while fear and something that felt uncomfortably like shame churned in his gut. The next morning, Amara was different. She went through the routine with the same gentle efficiency, but she watched him. Really watched him. Her touches became tests, pressing his arm when he wasn't expecting it, calling his name suddenly to see if he'd react, positioning his head one way and checking later to see if it had shifted. "I know this sounds crazy," she said while feeding him breakfast, "but I think something's changing. The doctors said it was impossible, that the damage was permanent, but what if they were wrong? What if you're in there, trying to come back?" The hope in her voice was agony. "I've been reading about traumatic brain injuries," she continued, wiping pureed oatmeal from the corner of his mouth with heartbreaking tenderness. "About locked-in syndrome, about minimal consciousness states. What if you can hear me? What if you've been hearing me this whole time?" She leaned close, her face inches from his, and Min-jae could smell her shampoo, something coconut and sweet. Her eyes searched his with desperate intensity. "If you can hear me, if you're in there, please.
Please give me a sign."
Anything. A blink, a twitch, anything at all. I need to know I'm not crazy." Every instinct in Min-jae's body screamed to respond, to end her uncertainty, to give her the truth she was begging for. But he couldn't.
Too much was at stake.
Too many people would die if he broke now, including possibly her. So he gave her nothing. Just the empty stare, the blank face, the appearance of a man who'd left his body years ago. Amara's face crumpled. She pulled back, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry for wanting you to be there. That's selfish, isn't it? Maybe it's better if you're not aware. Maybe consciousness would just be torture." She wiped her eyes roughly. "I just feel so alone, and I wanted to believe that maybe I wasn't. That maybe someone was finally listening." She left the room quickly, and Min-jae heard her crying in the hallway, muffled sobs that tore at something in his chest he'd thought was dead. That was when the tear fell. He didn't mean for it to happen, didn't plan it, didn't want it. But the sound of her pain, the knowledge that he was causing it, cracked something open inside him that he couldn't seal back up fast enough. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Amara came back 10 minutes later, composed, professional. She'd washed her face, pulled herself together, rebuilt whatever armor she wore to get through her days. She was adjusting his position, moving his arm, when she froze.
His cheek was wet.
She stared at it, then at him, then back at the tear track glistening on his skin. "Oh my God." Her voice was barely audible. "Oh my God." Her hand came up slowly, fingers trembling, and touched the wetness on his face. When she pulled back, her fingertip was damp. "You're crying." It wasn't a question. She wasn't asking if it was possible, if there was some medical explanation. She knew. "You heard me crying. You heard me, and you're crying too." She grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her even though his eyes couldn't shift, couldn't focus. "How long?" she demanded. "How long have you been in there? How long have you been listening to me pour my heart out like a fool?" Her voice was rising, cracking with emotion. "How long, Min-jae?" The use of his first name, the raw betrayal in her voice, almost broke him. But he held on, stayed still, gave her nothing but that one tear that had escaped despite everything. Amara released him, stumbling backward. Her chest heaved with rapid breaths that sounded close to panic. I need to call Director Han. I need to tell the doctor. This is important. This is a breakthrough. She pulled out the emergency phone with shaking hands. Then stopped. But if you're in there, she said slowly, thinking it through, and you've been in there for a while, why haven't you shown it before? Why now? Why just a tear? Her eyes narrowed. Unless you didn't mean to. Unless that was a mistake. She walked back to him, crouched down so they were eye level. What are you hiding? She whispered. What's really going on in this house? For the first time since this had started, Min-jae felt genuine fear. Not for himself, but for her. Because if she started digging, if she started asking questions, if she accidentally stumbled into the truth about who he was and what he'd done and what was planned, the syndicate would kill her without hesitation. She was a liability he'd created through his own weakness. Before either of them could move, alarms screamed through the house. Amara jerked upright, eyes wide. What is that? The lights cut out. Emergency reds illuminated the hallway outside. Through the window, Min-jae could see figures moving in the garden, too many of them, spreading out with tactical precision. The door slammed open. Director Han stood there, gun in hand, face grim. We have a breach, she said curtly. Chinese syndicate. Someone talked. They know he's here. Know who's here. Amara's voice was high with confusion and fear. What are you talking about? He's just a patient, he's nobody, why would? Lock it down. Director Han barked into a radio. Then to Amara. You need to come with me. Now. I'm not leaving him. Amara moved to stand between Director Han and Min-jae's wheelchair. If someone's breaking in, if he's in danger, I'm not just going to. He's not who you think he is, Director Han interrupted. And staying here will get you killed. Move. What do you mean he's not? Gunfire erupted from somewhere downstairs.
Close.
Too close. Director Han grabbed Amara's arm, trying to pull her toward the door. Amara resisted, looking back at Min-jae with confusion and fear and something that looked heartbreakingly like concern for his safety. We can't leave him here alone, she shouted over the alarms. He can't defend himself. He can't move. He'll be helpless. More gunfire. Closer now. Footsteps thundering up the stairs. Director Han made a decision. She released Amara, spun, and locked the bedroom door. Then she moved to the wall panel beside the bookshelf and pressed something. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden room. Inside, she ordered. Both of you. I can't move him by myself. The wheelchair won't. He can move himself, Director Han said flatly. Amara turned to stare at Min-jae. What? The door shuddered as someone tried to force it open. Wood splintered. Director Han raised her gun, aimed at the door, and said without looking away, Stand up, Min-jae. We're out of time. The world slowed down. Amara's face, shocked and betrayed. The door breaking apart. The gun in Director Han's steady hand. And Min-jae, sitting in a wheelchair he didn't need, maintaining a lie that had just killed them all. He stood up. Amara made a sound like she'd been punched. Min-jae's legs were weak, shaking from months of limited use, but they held. He turned to face her, really face her, meeting her eyes with his own that were very much alive and aware. I'm sorry, he said, his voice rough and cracking. Amara, I'm so sorry. She couldn't finish. Couldn't process. Just stared at him like he was a ghost, or a stranger, or something worse than both. The door burst open. 3 men, armed, professional. They saw Director Han first, started to raise their weapons. She fired twice, dropped 2 of them. The third got a shot off that went wide, shattering the window. Director Han's return fire caught him in the chest. Move, she screamed. Min-jae grabbed Amara's wrist. She tried to pull away, but he was stronger, and he dragged her toward the hidden room even as she fought him. Let me go. You lied. You lying son of a... He shoved her through the opening. Director Han followed, slapping the panel. The walls sealed shut behind them just as more men entered the bedroom. They were in a narrow corridor, dark except for strips of emergency lighting along the floor. Director Han was already moving deeper in, but Min-jae stopped, turning to Amara. She'd backed against the wall, as far from him as the narrow space allowed. Her chest heaved. Tears streamed down her face, but her expression wasn't sad. It was furious. "You could hear me," she said, voice shaking. "This whole time. 3 months of me spilling my guts, telling you everything, every humiliating thing about my life, and you just sat there listening like it was entertainment." "No," Min-jae said urgently. "No, it wasn't like that. I never meant." "What are you?" she demanded.
Who are you?
"Director Han said you're not who I think. So who the hell are you, and why are people trying to kill you?" Before he could answer, Director Han called back. "We need to keep moving. This corridor leads to the garage. We have maybe 5 minutes before they find the entrance." Amara looked between them, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You're criminals. Both of you. This whole thing, the mansion, the money, the security, it's all because you're—" "It's complicated," Min-jae started. "Don't." She held up a hand. "Don't you dare tell me it's complicated. You let me talk to you for 3 months. You let me trust you.
You let me care about you.
And it was all a lie." "Not all of it," Min-jae said desperately. "Your words, what you told me, that was real. And what I felt." "You don't get to talk about feelings." Amara's voice cracked. "You don't get to pretend this meant something when I didn't even know who you were." An explosion rocked the house. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Director Han was back, grabbing them both. Sentiment later. Survival now.
Move.
They ran through the corridor, Min-jae's legs screaming in protest, Amara sobbing and furious beside him. Behind them, the sounds of the house being torn apart. Ahead, an unknown future where everything had changed and nothing would ever be simple again. If you're as shaken as Amara is right now, you're not alone. Drop a comment below telling us what you would do in her situation. Would you run? Would you stay and demand answers? Would you forgive him? Let us know, because what happens next is even more devastating than this betrayal. They emerged in an underground garage that looked more like a military bunker. 3 black SUVs sat waiting, engines already running. Director Han shoved them toward the nearest one, but before they could reach it, Min-jae stopped. "Where are you taking her?" he demanded. "Safe house. Same place as you." "No," Min-jae's voice was firm despite his shaking legs. "She goes somewhere else. Somewhere they can't connect to me." "She's already connected to you," Director Han snapped. "They saw her in your room. They know she's your caregiver. They'll use her to get to you. Then we make them think she's nothing." Min-jae turned to Amara, who stood frozen, her face still wet with tears. "When they question you, and they will question you, you tell them the truth. You were hired to care for a brain-damaged patient. You had no idea who I was. You were just doing a job." "That's what I thought I was doing," Amara said coldly. The words hit harder than any bullet could have. Min-jae forced himself to continue. "You tell them I never spoke to you, never acknowledged you. You're a victim in this, which is the truth. They might hurt you, but they won't kill you if they think you're worthless to me. So, I am worthless to you." It wasn't a question. That's not. Min-jae's throat closed. He couldn't do this. Couldn't say the words that would save her life but destroy whatever microscopic chance remained that she might someday understand. But he had to. "You are nothing. A caregiver. Easily replaced. I felt nothing for you." Each word was a knife in his own chest, but he kept his face blank, cold, the same emptiness he'd shown her for 3 months. Amara's expression shuddered. Something died behind her eyes, and Min-jae knew he'd never get it back. "Miss Cole was paid very well for her silence," Director Han added, stepping into the performance. "She signed extensive NDAs. She's legally bound to never speak of her employment here or face prosecution. From her perspective, she was caring for a disabled civilian. Nothing more." "Nothing more," Amara repeated numbly. "Right. Nothing more." Director Han made a call. Within minutes, 2 men in suits arrived, not the tactical team but lawyers, cleaners, the people who erased inconvenient truths. They took Amara gently but firmly by the arms. "We'll take her home," one of them said to Director Han. "Prepare her statement." Make sure she understands the consequences of talking. Amara didn't resist. Didn't look back at Min-jae. Just let them lead her away like a ghost, empty and hollow. The moment she disappeared through the exit, Min-jae's legs gave out. He caught himself on the SUV, breathing hard. That was the right call, Director Han said quietly. The only call. I know. She'll be safe now. They'll believe she's irrelevant. I know. You did the right thing. Min-jae didn't answer. There was nothing right about any of this. 3 weeks passed in a blur of safe houses and strategy meetings. The breach had been bad, but not catastrophic. Director Han's intelligence network had prevented total compromise. They'd lost 2 safe houses and 3 men, but the core operation remained intact. More importantly, they'd gained something. The attack had forced the syndicate to expose resources they'd kept hidden, reveal connections they'd thought were secret. For the first time in 3 years, Min-jae could see the full scope of the organization that had killed his family. And he could see how to destroy it. We have everything, Director Han said during a meeting in their 4th safe house, spreading documents across the table. Bank records, shipment manifests, connections to officials at the consulate. But the linchpin is Chun Wei. He's the bridge between the Chinese operation and the Chicago syndicate. If we take him down publicly, with evidence, the whole structure collapses. When? Min-jae asked. 2 weeks. He's attending a charity gala at the Peninsula Hotel. Public, prestigious, impossible to deny. We leak the evidence that night, simultaneously to the FBI, media, and the Chinese government. He goes down, the syndicate fractures, and you finally get your revenge. Revenge. The word tasted like ash. Min-jae had spent 3 years planning for this moment, and now that it was within reach, all he could think about was Amara's face when he'd called her nothing. What about loose ends? He asked. Witnesses who know I'm alive? Handled. The previous caregivers have been relocated with generous severance and renewed NDAs. The medical staff believe you died in the attack. Your death will be made official within the week.
Director and post.
Including to Miss Cole. She already thinks I'm dead, Min-jae said flatly. Dead or a monster. There's no difference. Actually, Director Han said carefully, there might be a problem with Miss Cole. Min-jae's head snapped up. What problem? She's not cooperating with the narrative. Our lawyers gave her the statement, explained the legal consequences, offered her a substantial settlement to ensure her silence. She refused the money. Said she wanted nothing from us. Nothing that came from you. And she's been asking questions. What kind of questions? About who you really are. What really happened? She went to the mansion or tried to. Police have it cordoned off as a crime scene. She's been calling hospitals, morgues, trying to find out if you're alive or dead. Director Han's expression was troubled. She's not letting it go. She's in danger, Min-jae said immediately. If the syndicate sees her searching, they'll know she matters to you. Yes. Which is why we need to shut this down. I can have our lawyers be more forceful. Threaten prosecution, deportation of her family if needed. She'll stop. No, the word came out harder than Min-jae intended.
No threats.
No force. Just keep her safe. Watch her, protect her, but don't hurt her more than I already have. Director Han studied him for a long moment. You care about her. That's irrelevant. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you threw away 3 years of perfect cover for a woman you claim meant nothing. You stood up, exposed yourself, saved her life. That's not nothing. Min-jae stood, walking to the window. Outside, Chicago spread out gray and cold under winter clouds. Somewhere in that city, Amara was living her life, trying to understand what had happened. Maybe hating him. Probably hating him. She should hate him. It doesn't matter what I feel, he said quietly. In 2 weeks, Kong Min-jae dies officially. The man she knew never existed. What I feel died with my family 3 years ago. Did it? Director Han's voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Because the man I pulled from that burning house was already dead inside. He wanted revenge, not life. But these past few months, talking to her, listening to her, I saw something change in you. You started wanting to live again. Then she made me weak. She made you human. Min-jae turned to face her. Human gets you killed in our world. You know that better than anyone. I also know that revenge without purpose is just suicide with extra steps. You've been killing yourself slowly for 3 years. Maybe she was the universe giving you a reason to stop. The universe killed my daughter, Min-jae said harshly. I don't trust its gifts. The conversation ended there, but Director Han's words haunted him. That night, alone in another anonymous safe house, Min-jae did something he'd forbidden himself from doing. He opened the file Director Han kept on Amara, the surveillance reports, the protection detail updates. She'd gone back to work at Henderson's, the same department store that had overlooked her, underpaid her, treated her like she was invisible. She'd moved out of her apartment, something cheaper, because she'd refused the settlement money. She'd lost weight, not in a healthy way but in the way people did when grief stole their appetite. The surveillance photos showed her looking thin, tired, older than her 28 years. And tucked in the back of the file was something that made Min-jae's breath stop. A journal. Amara's journal, recovered from her apartment by the security sweep team. He shouldn't read it. It was a violation, another betrayal on top of all the others. But his hands opened it anyway, hungry for her words the way an addict craves poison. The entries from before she'd worked for him were painful. Loneliness, rejection, self-doubt written in her round, careful handwriting. Then the entries changed. She wrote about him, about the strange peace she'd found talking to someone who couldn't judge her, about how caring for him had made her feel purposeful, needed, important for the first time in years. The last entry was dated the day after the attack. I don't know what's real anymore, she'd written. Was any of it real? Did he hear me when I said I was starting to care about him? Did he feel anything at all? Or was I just a joke, a lonely fat girl pouring her heart out to a man who was laughing at her the whole time? I want to hate him. I should hate him. But all I feel is empty. Like someone reached inside and scooped out everything that made me feel alive and left nothing but this hollow ache. I was invisible before I met him. At least then, I didn't know what it felt like to be seen. Now I know, and going back to invisible is killing me. Min-jae closed the journal, hands shaking. He'd thought hurting her would save her. But he'd just traded one death for another. The next morning, he made a decision. I want to see her, he told Director Han. Absolutely not. We're 2 weeks from the operation. If you're seen, I'll be careful. One meeting. Let me explain. Let me give her closure. Closure. Director Han laughed, sharp and bitter. You want to ease your conscience. Don't dress it up as kindness. Maybe. But she deserves answers. Real ones, not the lies we fed her. And if seeing you puts her in danger, then I'll die protecting her. But I'm not letting her spend the rest of her life thinking she was a joke to me. Director Han stared at him for a long moment. Then she sighed. You're going to get us both killed. You know that, right? Probably.
Fine.
But I choose the location, the time, and the security. And if anything goes wrong, if there's even a hint of syndicate surveillance, we abort and you never see her again. Understood. Understood. 3 days later, Director Han's assistant delivered a message to Amara at work. Simple, direct. An address on the south side.
A time.
And 3 words. He's not dead. Director Han had wanted to add more context, more explanation, but Min-jae had refused. Either Amara would come or she wouldn't. Either she wanted answers, or she decided he wasn't worth another minute of her life. He waited in an abandoned warehouse Director Han's team had swept 3 times. 2 exits, rooftop access, 6 security personnel hidden in strategic positions. If the syndicate somehow tracked them here, they'd have time to evacuate.
Probably.
7 o'clock came and went. Min-jae told himself she wasn't coming, that she'd made the smart choice, the safe choice.
Told himself it was better this way.
Then the door opened. Amara stood in the doorway, backlit by the setting sun, and for a moment Min-jae forgot how to breathe. She looked different. Thinner, yes, but also harder somehow, like she'd built walls where there used to be softness. She wore jeans and a heavy coat, her hair pulled back severely, her face carefully blank. She looked at him standing there on legs that worked, with eyes that saw, and her expression didn't change. "So you're alive," she said flatly. "Yes." "And you could walk the whole time?" "Yes." "And hear me?" "Every word." She nodded slowly, like he'd confirmed something she'd already known. "Why am I here?" "Because I owe you the truth." "Now you want to give me truth?" Her voice was cold, controlled. "After 3 months of lies? After letting me humiliate myself every single day, telling you things I've never told anyone, crying in front of you, touching you like you were." She stopped, composure cracking just slightly. "Why now?" "Because you deserve to know it wasn't a game. You weren't entertainment. What you said to me, what you gave me, it was the only real thing in my life for 3 years. Amara laughed, but it was sharp, jagged. "The only real thing? I wasn't even talking to a real person. I was talking to a lie." "You were talking to me," Min-jae said, taking a step closer. She didn't move back, but her body tensed. "My name is Kong Min-jae. 3 years ago, the Chinese syndicate murdered my wife and my 6-year-old daughter because of choices I made, because of the life I lived. I faked my condition to draw out the people responsible. I was already dead inside. I was just waiting to take them down with me. So, I was what? Cover? A prop in your revenge story? At first, maybe. But then you started talking to me. Really talking. Not at me, not performing, just existing out loud. And somewhere in all that darkness I'd wrapped around myself, your voice became the only light." His own voice cracked. "You talked about being invisible, but Amara, you were the only thing I could see. Every laugh, every tear, every moment you trusted me with your pain, it brought me back to life when I didn't want to be alive." "Stop." Tears were streaming down her face now. "Stop making this sound like some romantic thing. You lied to me.
You used me. I did.
And I will regret that until the day I die, which will probably be soon." He gestured vaguely at the warehouse around them. "In 2 weeks, I'm going to destroy the organization that killed my family. And I'm probably not going to survive it. But before I do, I needed you to know that you weren't nothing. You were everything. You were the reason I remembered how to be human." Amara was quiet for a long moment, tears falling silently. Then she said, "You called me nothing. When they were taking me away, you looked right at me and said I was nothing to you. To protect you. If they thought you mattered, they would have killed you. I had to make them believe you were worthless, so you could be safe. And the cruel thing is, I believe you," Amara whispered. "I believe that you think you were protecting me. But you know what you actually did? You confirmed every fear I've ever had. That I'm disposable. That I'm the person men use when they need something, but discard the moment it's inconvenient. That I'm not worth choosing, not worth fighting for, not worth the truth." Each word was a bullet, and Min-jae took them all. "You're right. I made the choice that kept you breathing but killed something in you. I don't know if that was right or wrong. I just know I couldn't let you die." "You should have let me choose," Amara said, her voice breaking completely now. "You should have told me the truth and let me decide if I wanted to stay or run. But you took that from me. You took my agency, my choice, and you decided what I could handle. Just like everyone else in my life." "I'm sorry." The words were inadequate, microscopic against the weight of what he'd done. "I'm so sorry, Amara." She wiped her face roughly. "Tell me something. When I said I was starting to care about you, when I held your hand during that storm, when I told you that you were the best relationship I'd ever had even though you couldn't respond, did you feel anything?" Min-jae met her eyes. "Everything. I felt everything." "Then why couldn't you just tell me? Before everything went wrong, why couldn't you just speak?" "Because I didn't deserve you. I still don't. I'm a monster who got his family killed and spent 3 years planning mass murder. You're a woman who sees the best in people, who gives kindness to someone she thought couldn't even appreciate it. What right did I have to drag you into my darkness? That wasn't your decision to make." Amara's composure finally shattered completely. "You don't get to decide you're too broken for me. You don't get to choose my limits. I spent my whole life having people decide I'm too much or not enough, and you did the same thing, just dressed it up as protection. She was right. God, she was right about all of it. What do you want from me? Min-jae asked quietly. Tell me what I can do to make any of this better. Amara looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. A necklace. The one he'd sent her from the first safe house, the one that had belonged to Jian. I want you to take this back, she said, holding it out. I can't keep it. It's too heavy. Min-jae didn't take it. It was my wife's. I sent it to you because she would have liked you. She would have told me I was an idiot for lying to you. She always saw through my bullshit. I don't want to be a replacement for your dead wife, Amara said, voice shaking. I don't want to be the woman who saved the broken man. I don't want to be a chapter in your redemption story. I want to be chosen because of who I am, not because of what I represent. You were never a replacement. You were proof that I could still feel something other than hate. That I was still human enough to recognize beauty when it was standing right in front of me, talking to me like I mattered even when I couldn't respond. Amara closed her eyes, the necklace still dangling from her fingers. I can't do this. I can't be the woman who waits while you go get yourself killed for revenge. I can't be another person you sacrifice yourself to protect. I can't love someone who's already dead inside. The word hung between them.
Love.
She hadn't meant to say it. Min-jae could see that in her face, the way her eyes widened with horror at her own confession. Amara. No, she stepped back. No, you don't get to respond to that. You don't get to make this harder than it already is. She set the necklace on a crate between them. Go get your revenge. Destroy the people who hurt you. Do whatever you need to do. But leave me out of it. I can't watch you die, and I can't be the reason you decide to live. That's too much weight for someone who just learned she's not invisible. She turned to leave, and every instinct in Min-jae's body screamed to stop her, to say the words that might make her stay. But he'd taken enough from her. Her privacy, her trust, her sense of safety. He wouldn't take her future too. So he let her walk away. At the door, she paused without turning around. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I hope you survive. I hope you get your revenge and find whatever peace that brings. And I hope someday you meet someone who you think is worth being honest with from the start. Then she was gone. Min-jae stood in the empty warehouse, staring at the necklace she'd left behind, and felt the last warm thing inside him turn to ice. 2 weeks later, at the Peninsula Hotel Charity Gala, Chun-wei was arrested in front of 300 witnesses and 40 news cameras. The evidence was irrefutable. The syndicate collapsed. Connections to the Chinese consulate caused an international incident. Everything Min-jae had planned for 3 years came to fruition perfectly. He should have been satisfied. He should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt nothing. The Chinese government, desperate to contain the scandal, made a deal. Min-jae's crimes would be buried in exchange for his cooperation in a larger investigation. But he couldn't stay in America. Couldn't stay anywhere the syndicate's remaining fragments might find him. He was sent to a black site facility, not quite a prison but not freedom either. A place where dangerous men who knew too much were kept alive but isolated. Director Han visited once a month with updates. The syndicate was scattered, powerless. The people who'd killed his family were dead or imprisoned. He'd won. It felt like losing. 18 months passed in gray monotony. Then one day, Director Han arrived with an unusual expression. You have a visitor request, she said. Normally I'd deny it, but given the circumstances. Who? Amara Cole. She's been writing to my office for 6 months. I didn't tell you, because I thought it would make things harder. But she's persistent. Director Han handed him a letter. This came yesterday. Min-jae opened it with shaking hands. Amara's handwriting, that careful roundness he remembered from her journal. I don't know if you'll get this, it read. I don't know if you're alive or dead, or if you even want to hear from me. But I need to tell you something. I've spent 18 months angry at you.
Hurt by you.
Trying to hate you. But I can't. Because as much as you lied, as much as you broke my trust, You also gave me something I'd never had before. You listened. You really listened, not because you had to, but because you chose to. And somewhere in all that darkness you were living in, you made space for my pain too. That's not nothing. That's not worthless. So, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to stop carrying this anger. I forgive you for lying. I forgive you for protecting me in the cruelest way possible. I forgive you for making me feel seen and then disappearing. I hope wherever you are, you've forgiven yourself too. You deserve to live with what you've done, not die running from it. Min-jae read it 3 times, then looked at Director Han. Can I see her? The facility doesn't allow visitors. Can you make an exception? Director Han was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll see what I can do. 6 months later, Min-jae sat in a sterile visiting room, hands shaking, waiting. The door opened. Amara walked in. She looked different, healthier. Her hair was natural now, a crown of curls she wore with confidence. She'd gained the weight back and then some, and she carried it like armor, like strength. She sat across from him, separated by bulletproof glass, and picked up the phone.
Hi, she said. Eat.
His voice cracked on the single syllable. You look terrible, she said, and there was the ghost of a smile. They feeding you in here? Not your cooking. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Her smile grew a fraction. I wasn't a great cook anyway. You just ate it because you had no choice. I ate it because it was made with care. That was all I needed. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Amara said, I didn't come here to restart anything.
I want you to know that.
I'm seeing someone. A good guy, boring job, thinks I'm beautiful. It's nice. Normal. Each word hurt, but Min-jae nodded.
I'm glad.
You deserve that. I came because I needed to see you alive. I needed to know that your revenge didn't kill you, that you're living with your choices instead of dying from them. That's all. She paused. And I needed to tell you that you were wrong. About what? When you said I made you human again. You had that backwards. You made me human. You made me realize I was worth listening to, worth caring about, worth more than being invisible. And even though it happened in the worst, most complicated way possible, I'm grateful for that.
So, thank you.
And goodbye, Min-jae. She stood to leave. Min-jae pressed his hand against the glass. She looked at it for a long moment, then placed her hand on the opposite side, their palms separated by inches and lifetimes. I'm learning to live with what I've done, he said. Because of you. Good, she whispered. That's good. Then she walked away, and this time Min-jae let her go without breaking. 3 years later, Amara ran a care home for forgotten people on Chicago's South Side. People society had given up on, deemed worthless, decided were invisible. She saw them. She listened. She gave them the same gift a broken man had once given her. She wore a necklace every day. It had belonged to someone else first, but it was hers now. A reminder that the most painful things could still be beautiful if you learned to carry them right. She never visited Min-jae again. But every year on the anniversary of the night he'd stood up and shattered her world, she sent him a letter. Just one line, the same every time.
Still here.
Still seen. Still choosing to live. And in his concrete room in a place that had no name, Min-jae would read those 4 words and remember what it felt like to be human. The woman who'd felt invisible had taught a ghost how to breathe again. And sometimes, that was the only happy ending possible. So, what did you think of this impossible love story? Could you forgive someone who lied to you for months, even if they did it to protect you? Or is trust something that once broken can never be fully repaired? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, touched you, or made you think about love and redemption differently, smash that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Afro-Korean Chronicle TV for more stories that explore the messy, complicated, beautiful intersections of love, culture, and the human heart. We post new stories every week, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And remember, You're never as invisible as you think you are. Someone is always listening. Someone is always seeing you. You just have to believe you're worth being seen. Until next time, this is Afro-Korean Chronicle TV, reminding you that the most powerful love stories aren't about perfect people finding each other. They're about broken people choosing to be honest anyway.